a quick walk around of a car that I bought a couple of years back, really just as a beater car, and wound up falling in love with it, sort of. And just wanted to give you a view of some of the features, because I think it's a car that not a lot of people know about or particularly care about, because it's the baby Range Rover called the LR2, also known as the Freelander 2 in Europe. So it's obviously it's a four-door. This is just technically a compact SUV. It has plenty of room for 5 people. I've had 5 adult friends, well, including myself, in the car, and it sits them very comfortably. There's also plenty of room for your dog in the back, or luggage, or whatever. And as far as styling goes, I like the way that the car looks. It's made to look a little bit like a mini Range Rover Sport. I do think that it does sometimes look a little bit, from certain angles, it does look a little bit like other SUVs out there, particularly compact SUVs. I think just all look very, very similar. So, but anyway, overall I like the styling, and it's really the ride and the way that the car drives that I think is where it shines, as well as its off-road capabilities. So according to Land Rover, this car can go any place that a Defender can go, just a little bit slower, and I believe it. I've taken it off-road, and it's very, very capable. But I will just hop in the car real quick. Well, actually, I'll go around and look at some of the features. So this one is an HSE model. It's about as well equipped as you can get. It has sat-nav. With the HSE, you get sat-nav, Bluetooth, and xenon lights. So all things that I do kind of value. Although sat-nav is quickly becoming less important these days with Waze and different kinds of things like that. But at any rate, it's a nice interior. One of the interesting things about this car is that, I don't know if you could quite see this, but Land Rover is so serious about off-roading that they actually have different drive modes. So you have a mode for regular driving, for snow, for crawling over rocks. I don't know if you can quite see that, and for sand. So they're different modes that basically it doesn't adjust the suspension, it doesn't really adjust the ride height or anything like that, but it will adjust the way that the car responds to throttle inputs. So that's also on the other models as well. So this being the entry-level model, it still does share a lot of the features that the Range Rover and the other Land Rovers have. So without further ado, let's take it out on the road, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. So the first interesting thing about this car is that it doesn't have a proper smart key, but what it does have is a key fob, which you just put in the little slot there and hit the start button. So it's not an automatic thing that some cars have. But let's get underway. Dog's with me, so you might hear her. So I actually originally bought this car, like I said in the beginning of the video, as a beater car. I looked into the Freelander just because I wanted something a little bit more interesting than just a cheap SUV to throw mulch in the back and to throw the dog in the back and to haul things and lumber or whatever. So I thought, well, maybe there's something interesting I could look at. And so I originally considered the Freelander, but the Freelanders are now getting quite old. They're late 90s, early 2000s. 2003 was the last year. And the more investigating I did on the Land Rover Freelander, the less I liked it. They have a viscous coupling that only lasts 100,000 miles. They have a timing belt instead of a timing chain. So all those things kind of made me think, well, maybe what was its successor? What was the successor to that car? And maybe I could look into those. And so instead of budgeting $4,000 or $5,000 for a beater car, I was like, well, maybe a couple thousand more I can get the car's successor, and that's this one. So this is actually called the Freelander 2 in Europe, but here in America it's called the LR2. And the LR2 is a complete redesign of the Freelander. It doesn't have the viscous coupling anymore. It has an E-diff in the center, So it works really, really well, and it lasts. This car has over 100,000 miles on it, and there's nothing wearing out on the diff as far as I can see. The other thing is that it also has a better engine. This has a 3.2 liter inline six. It's actually a Volvo engine, makes about 230 horsepower, and so it definitely can get out of its own way. I wouldn't call it fast. But one of the nice things about the car, I think, is the handling, because it has a fully independent suspension. There's no solid rear axle. This car will actually keep up with you if you're going to do some even spirited driving. Not that I have this car for spirited driving. I have other cars for that. But if you need to get around and you need to get around a corner fast, it will do that for you. But aside from that, the car runs great. It drives great. This particular one has high miles. I try and keep it clean because I just like to keep my cars clean. And it hauls around the dog, and it hauls around everything I need it to. And really has been a joy to drive. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, if you like the other videos that I have on offer, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Oh, by the way, it also makes a nice noise. Let's see if we can. Not bad for a truck.